Right, so guys, let's kick off with the topic, Ed and May. And I've got a couple of quick sort of starter questions before we kind of jump into the questions asked. As you see, more questions are kind of coming in. Everyone, please remember to upvote the questions so that we jump in there in about 5 minutes time. We make sure we get to the most important and valuable questions first. Dan, a question for you. Given that we're talking about kind of multi-location sort of businesses, what do you think is the big benefit or the big pro and advantage that large brands have over, let's say, SMBs in terms of local marketing? And do those advantages extend all the way through what we might refer as multi-location businesses? So you've got, let's say, the multi-thousand location businesses like sort of Starbucks and sort of Home Depot. But then you've also got those sort of smaller, like sort of 5, 6, 7 regional train sort of businesses, which might classify themselves as kind of multi-location businesses. What advantages do bigger businesses have, and do those advantages stretch across the board for businesses with like 8 locations, right up to those with a couple of thousand locations?
Yeah, I think that I'm curious what your thoughts are here, Andrew, but I think the number 2 for me are money and their domain, right? Like those are just kind of things that they have as a result of their business that an SMB can't have, right? They just make more money, so they have more money to spend. And as a result of having more locations and kind of doing more marketing, they just have a stronger domain. And that's like, those are 2 real things that put them ahead in most situations if they can channel them.
Yeah, I would say actually, to boil it down even further, they get more links, right? Yeah. And actually the have more money thing is true to some extent, right? But it's also they have more expenses too. So as an example, we work with a 33 location chain in the Bay Area that had to furlough 700 people because of COVID, and so I don't think they're spending more money, let's say, on their web efforts than a single location might, but they have more things to do too. But I think they still have an inherent advantage because of their ability to be in more locations, both from kind of a proximity point of view, and then their ability to generate more links just naturally, more pages, more locations, more links.
So on the point of kind of budget, if you boil it down to like a per location budget, I would imagine an SMB might have more purchasing power per location than a bigger brand, or is that not the case?
It's so dependent on the industry. So as an example, we're working with this 33 location retailer, and we're actually working only right now on focusing on a couple of their locations because they don't want to spend an insane amount of money just doing this stuff right now. But we're working with a lawyer that has a single location, and they're spending more money on their single location, right? Because legal SEO is a bit more challenging than, say, retailer SEO.
And I think that this is actually where like the scale really comes in the dollars that I was talking about, right? Like, so even if, say, a brand like Walmart or Home Depot only spends like $500 per location versus like a lawyer or like a small retailer that spends $5,000 per location, they still have so many more locations that what that budget gets them in aggregate across their domain is like way too much for that smaller chain to handle. And then at that level too, it's not just like the dollars per location. They're also like, think about their like e-com merchandisers and all that stuff that are going into those joint e-commerce retail solutions that are also driving the business versus a retail versus a location non-e-commerce only kind of website or web solution.
Okay, so the economies of scale make a big difference, a big difference there. Thinking about I guess economies of scale, given what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of kind of algorithm changes in kind of Google sort of processes, do you think bigger brands have benefited more and gained more opportunity in that time frame, let's say last 3 or 4 years, versus sort of smaller independent businesses that maybe don't have the same brand authority?
I'd say, based on our client base, so this kind of anecdotal data, though we have a lot of data, I'd say the bigger brands see less volatility when it comes to rankings and performance. Whereas an SMB can go through an algorithm update, let's say, and suddenly lose half its business because instead of getting 20 clicks a day, it got 10 clicks a day. And so and it's only because they stopped ranking on one keyword, or two keywords, but those keywords were critical to the business. So in that way, bigger brands do have this benefit because at least the ones we've worked on, unless they do something royally stupid to their own website, we don't see them like going way up or way down every time something happens with Google.
But I think that's what's illustrative to me of why I would say that big brands win in Google, like as a default, right? Like not necessarily like baked into the algorithm or whatever, but everything about how they operate as a business is what Google wants to rank. And so like Andrew's saying, as long as you don't mess it up, you're going to see kind of continued incremental gains, while SMBs have a lot to win or lose based on what they're doing, right? Like they have more like skin in the game or control over their own destiny, as it were, right? Like there's whereas brands just are like on the Google train and kind of riding it.
Yeah, like a good example was there was a last kind of local or GMB screw up in May, and a 8-location Bay Area firm we're working with went from, let's say, averaging position 1 or 2 in the local pack to averaging like 6. And so they lost a lot of leads. And for, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. But another bigger brand we're working in the Bay Area, like they didn't even care like whether, 10 locations went up or down for a couple of weeks, right?
I would actually kind of go on top of that and say that all of our multi-location clients saw wins through the rank tracking and like pack ranking bug, right? Just to illustrate how little it affected them, right? Like their analytics through that time continue to go up and to the right, and you don't see anything about movement with it at all, right? And so,
so the bigger, the bigger the brand, the less who cares about it and what any particular GMB page is doing. And it's more about do we have a long-term good strategy to make incremental wins over time?
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. So just so I understand it, is it the case that they, because they're so big that they can ride out those sort of small blips, but as long as the longer trend is in the right direction, they're making the right strides, that's what they care about, because their view is long-term. And they'll accept the occasional dip in the road, or are they insulated? They're insulated. Means they ride it out because they've got vast domain authority.
Right past it, right? Like you literally can't see it in their analytics and Search Console data, either place, right? Like if we wanted to look in granular rank tracking per keyword per location, you could like suss out some of the movement, but like as a whole, like this is like where looking at like how Google moves as a whole is important, and even looking at like industries and scale and SERPs is only a microcosm of it, right? Like those big fluctuations for SMBs are like nothing in the grander keyword ecosystem for that industry across like the United States, North America, or the world, right? And so it only affects a small percentage of queries. And if you're in it and you're an SMB, you're hosed. But for everybody else, it's no big deal.
And the sad truth of it, or I don't know if it's sad, the brutal truth of it is the bigger the brand, the less they care about Google My Business. And not that they don't care, but typically Google My Business is seen as a portal, an entryway, a lead gen to foot traffic, right? For people with physical locations. And most of the teams working on Google My Business are offshoots of the e-commerce team who care about online sales. Mm-hmm. And so the amount of online sales that go through GMB, it happens, but it's not as substantial as coming through other channels. So if every GMB for 1,000 location retailer lost rankings, they would be like, what's going on? We got to do something. But when 20 lose rankings, it's like maybe a store manager might complain, and that might go through a myriad channel and somehow make it way an email to Dan. Like, hey, can you help this guy out? Like, it's not a priority.
It's just really fascinating, actually, just getting insight into, like, for, I guess, people out there who might be entering or entertaining working with sort of multi-location businesses. Am I right in thinking that they are much more strategic in how they look at their operations and marketing, whereas local businesses are much more tactical in terms of utilizing different channels and tweaking things and being much more sort of flexible and even sort of short-termist about the use of different channels and the optimization?
I think it totally depends on the culture of the company. We've worked with both large and small clients, We have some large clients who are incredibly strategic, like, and want to
incredibly tactical, like big teams working constantly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally. Like doing A/B testing on like 50 million things. And then we have some big clients who are like, can you just handle it? Like, yeah, we know it's important, but we got stuff to do. And I'd say it's the same with SMBs. Some are like, I want to look at my analytics every day and figure out what moves the needle. And some are like, let me know every month how we're doing.
A thing to add on to that is like this has like not been a thing in the kind of traditional SMB local SEO space for a while, right? It's been a focus on GMB through like GMB metrics and rank tracking on GMB, but most like enterprise multi-location brands, like their local marketers, like their local SEOs don't get metriced on, their performance isn't on GMB performance. Their performance is based on like location page performance or entrances to location pages or revenue driven through location pages, right? All the things that go associated with GMB. And so the GMB itself is just a component of the channel that they're working to manage, right? And so, they've kind of had their eyes on the prize on the way that all of these things have been working together to kind of drive a holistic local search strategy for a bit. It's just, Google is just like making that like cranking the needle on that for everybody, the dial on that for everybody else a lot recently, right? Where they're just so interrelated, you can't separate them anymore. And I think personally, GMB is like not its own channel anymore. That's like my 2 cents. But
okay. What is the, do you typically have like a number one objective or KPI that you work towards with a multi-location business? Or if there's kind of 2 or 3, what do they really care about? What basically tells them that whether things are going right for them and that you're doing the job that they want you to do?
I'd say we have, again, it's like so varied by client. So one of the bigger clients that Dan runs, I think they're mostly interested in phone calls, right? That's the number one thing. Phone calls, maybe form fills. Another big client that I happen to run, I think they're just interested in making sure it's not broken, making sure the hours are right, the price of gas is right in Google My Business, and that people aren't sending them complaints. I don't think they think about it any more than that.
We don't have a single client right now. This is like, maybe we'll peel back the lid on this, but we don't have a single client that cares about PAC ranking as a KPI. Not one. Not a multi-location one.
We have there's a smaller one I'm thinking about. But
sure. Yeah, the one that was affected, the one Bay Area lawyer that we have that was affected by the location shakeup, right, is very concerned about it. And absent that, our entire client portfolio is like not paying attention to it that granularly.
And
there's too much data to pay attention to when you have multi-locations. Like rank tracking for multi-locations is ridiculous, right? And looking at GMB insights even at a roll-up is ridiculous. And so it's
we have one
really
client with 330 domains, a domain for each location, right? And so that has to get data warehouse roll up into their own reports and then like segment it all for them individually, right? Like, how do you pay attention to that?
Yeah. We'll definitely touch on using data at scale in a little bit. I've got one question to you, then we're going to go to the questions down there. You mentioned you had one client you're working with, 33 location retailer in the kind of sort of Bay Area, but you're currently working on a couple of locations with them, right? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that a great model for you in terms of being able to test and learn on a smaller sample size that you can then roll out once you've established some wins for those 2 locations?
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a great model. I call it a necessary model. So SEO in 2020, people who kind of feel like they do good work, you all have probably heard I have been burned 50 times by you SEO guys. You've hired you and done nothing. So people are either reluctant to spend money on SEO until it proves itself, or they just don't know. And so they don't want to spend money on anything until it proves itself. And so particularly in a down economy, even if you want to improve your SEO, if you have, let's say, 33 locations, and you're resource constrained, probably the best thing you can do is invest a little bit in and focus on a very specific thing to prove out the model for yourself before you do it for every location. Mm-hmm. From our point of view, of course, we'd be like, oh, let's do a much bigger program. It's better for us, and we think it has more impact over the long term. But the reality is, you have to walk before you run with most clients. And this is a client, by the way, we've been working with off and on for I think 2 or 3 years. But they're just getting into moving from, hey, let's just make sure the site's not screwed up, to let's be proactive. And so now we're kind of dipping our toe in the proactive stuff.
I mean, this is like part of that you have to think about in some of these businesses too, right? Is this particular client is like a Magento 1.0 e-com infrastructure investment client, right? So like they spent a bunch of money building stuff a while ago, and like again, burn, not burn, middling performance or whatever, right? It's hard to rip that all down, reinvest a ton when you're like throwing bad, you don't want to throw good money after bad, right? And so it's just like people really need to be considering like what, like not just their like experience with like other SEO companies has been like, but what their investment has been in the digital channel, right? Because too many people are just like, oh, you just spent a ton of money on this, tear it down and do it again.
Yeah. As Andy, our PR guy, said in the chat, I think the key is case studies, and I think as SEO consultants, we are in the case study business first and foremost, proving out what we do over and over again. And once you prove it out, then everything's great. Then everyone's like, let's keep going. And they still have their doubts because new COOs come in and are like, this stuff sucks. This is stupid. And then you have to prove it over again to them.
Yeah. So Andy's your PR guy. So he's a plant in the audience. Hi there, Andy.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what he said, so here's the key to getting more money is case studies. Can you elaborate on that? That's really an interesting sort of sales-focused sort of consideration.
Well, it's kind of just what we said. Like you have to prove, for most businesses that don't have either the head of marketing or CEO doesn't, if they don't have SEO experience or they don't have an SEO-focused culture, like it's not a priority, then it's kind of like, oh, a thing we have to do. Someone told me I have to do it. So they're spending as little money on it as they can. And so what you have to do is show them, hey, I can like 10x your revenue, and I just did in a small scale. So now give me more budget so I can do it on a big scale, or whatever the number is. Yeah. And that's how we've over and over again been able to build budget and business from clients. And I think that's why we have so many long-term clients, is because we don't start out at like, here's the 1-year deal, give us $1 million. We're like, no, let's do a program and spend $20,000 or $10,000 and get you somewhere.
We also try to build, I think Andrew is underselling that we try to build like a digital model for a lot of our clients that we're doing long-term stuff with, which is not just like engaging in tactics or strategy with them. It's helping them like better incorporate all of this stuff to get like big business wins, right? Like again, like the one that he was talking, like a larger retailer that he manages that we've done work with for like 6 years at this point, right? It's just about constantly trying to sell them on like, okay, you care about not breaking things, but like you have to understand how you could be making more money in this model right here and getting, this is like where things like forecasting and doing all like the difficult business work and like sales work, like persuasion work on it is critical for big clients, right? Because they have to be able to take it somewhere and make sell it up the chain and own it at the end of the day and put their neck on the line, right? Like for you, it requires a lot of work.
I'd say one of the big differences between our smaller clients and our bigger clients is a huge percentage of the work on our bigger clients is reporting and presenting and kind of communicating and coaching. Exactly. And not like, hey, let's update your title tags or get you some backlinks, right?
Okay. So that's a good consideration for other agencies to take on board, is the fact they might factor in that there's a higher amount and probably a higher level of kind of communication needed, because I mean you're communicating and educating at different levels throughout the client's business there.
Yeah, and you have to become really well versed in their business, because you have to talk to most clients. Just are like, can you just deal with it? And you talk to the organization, and so you have to basically figure out how to get through, like, talk to the head of product and talk to the CTO and talk to the head of analytics. Like, why is your analytics reported this way when we think it's this way? Like, so you're actually like an internal guy, which is kind of a weird thing when you're like, I just want to like update your title tags and get you links.
And this is where I think a lot of agencies that focus on like SMBs or smaller multi-location businesses have challenges on the model for some of the larger brands, because they like literally require senior SEOs to do copious handholdings and go take meetings with core executive stakeholders in the business, right? And win. Or you're going to lose your contract, right? Like you're seriously going to lose your contract and they're going to go somewhere else. It's like very, it's just like a different set of like expectation management and again, education, very different.
Interesting. We'll circle back to that, but let's go and pick up the first question off the list, which has had 8 upvotes, which is great. So this question comes in from Gavin. Thanks, Gavin. Gavin's question is, let's say a client of mine has got 8 locations, and they're an auto repair shop. These 8 locations are spread out between Texas and Georgia. What is the best way to leverage GMB on our website to ensure that all of those locations get good organic and GMB rankings, but don't cannibalize each other with like one location dominating others? They do have some locations that are in the same metro area in Atlanta. So
sure.
How do they get I guess equal kind of sort of prominence and kind of value being driven for each of the locations?
Sure. So it's part of it is very straightforward. So the Google My Business part is kind of a joke. Like, okay, set up Google My Business for these locations, make sure they're categorized correctly. You've added your logo and photos and a description and all the good things you do on Google My Business. Use Google My Business posts if you can to basically harvest brand traffic. So Google My Business posts show up at the bottom typically of your Google My Business page when someone searches your brand. And that's you can use that as a very effective way to get a few very highly qualified clicks that might turn into a purchase. So the Google My Business part is kind of really straightforward. It's the website part and the quote unquote SEO part where you'll differentiate yourself. So on the website, you need to have location pages for each location you want to show up for. Even if it's in a metro area, if you have 10 locations in a metro area, well, it's Atlanta North, Atlanta South, Peachtree, or whatever the neighborhoods are in Atlanta, which, by the way, you can use in your Google My Business page. So you can say Peachtree, Home Depot, or whatever it is. And then you want to make sure that those location pages are accessible to Google, meaning you don't have a zip code only or search only store locator. You have basically a set of links off of your homepage or footer or navigation that take you to like Atlanta North, Atlanta South. And then you need to have really good location pages, meaning it's not just your name, address, and phone number and a map. If it's a home improvement page, you want to have some content. You want it to feel like a home improvement page, meaning it doesn't just say we do home improvement, but maybe it has products and services. Or if you're an electrician, it says, here's our services that we do in this town, that kind of thing. And you want it to be, one of the tricks or techniques we try to use is using relevant points of interest to the area you're trying to rank for. So near the airport, whatever the airport's name is, that kind of thing. And that can be a signal that a machine might understand that it's near the airport. And, ideally you have some dynamic content. So we've worked with multi-location we worked with a senior housing company where we implemented events on their location pages. And just by implementing events, a regular feed of events, that increased their performance.
Not just implementing, they had regular feed of events on their page, but they were deploying it in a way with JavaScript that it wasn't viewable in Google. This is like where also a lot of the intersection of technical SEO and like your multi-location business getting it right comes into play, right?
So it needs to be technical. Assume that your site is technically sound. It probably isn't, but it should be, right? So you need to have it technically sound for Googlebot. And then you do all the normal things to rank a page. You figure out a way to get links to those pages. You have a customer review policy that encourages people to leave reviews that can be seen by Google. And you keep doing that over and over again. The main challenge I think we see with locations and multi-locations in the same area is that cannibalization, where you kind of can't help it a bit because it's kind of dependent on where the person is with their phone, let's say. And but you can see if you use certain tools, you can kind of see like, oh, this one is showing up here, and we want the other one to show up. And then you've got to do tweaking, which is totally custom stuff. Like, why is this location ranking for north when it's like in the center? We want the north one. And then you have to make decisions about, well, which page is my GMB page going to link to? And how can I tweak the content on these pages to send Google in a different direction? And there's no like one answer for that. It's just like seeing what's happening and try to tweak it.
I actually want to bring this back to the 3 locations in Dallas, and that there's like what you were saying about you just can't help it. Like, you really, if you care about like dominating a market, like with suburban sprawl, like Dallas, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, or whatever, you have to be thinking about it and how you expand your locations and where they're physically located. That's like the best way that's going to get you that like meaningful search coverage, is baking it into the cake. And like, if you want to go rank on the other side of town, you got to have a location on the other side of town.
Yeah, so recently we had a storage. We did a consult for a storage client that had, let's just say, a location in central. I think it was actually Dallas, central Dallas, and then a location in North Dallas. And the central Dallas location was outranking the North Dallas when you were in North Dallas. Mm-hmm. And there were probably a million reasons why they were happening. I can't recall every reason. We were like, and it's like, there's no
one
like,
was much older, right? One was like a much older, like established location.
But there's no, with SEO, sometimes there's very black and white stuff, but most of the time it's like, well, it could be one of these 20 things. And so the job is to like go through the 20 things and check them off. Be like, okay, so one has more links. Well, maybe get more links to the other one. One has more reviews. Well, maybe get more reviews to the other one. And there's no one thing that you can be sure is going to move the needle.
But you think if you can identify the things that it might be, and you work through systematically trying to tweak and alter those, or add more weight where weight might be lacking, eventually you'll find a solution where you can kind of balance it out.
Yeah. So as an example, another agency called us because they have a client who has they have a Denver location and a South Denver location, and when you typed I can't remember whether you typed South Denver, you got the Denver location, or vice versa. And it was 100% because Google looked at the pages on the website as virtually the same, like they're duplicates, except one says South and the other one just says Denver. And so the solution, right, is to like, you need to change the content of these pages, and you need to do something to make the South Denver page more prominent.
And this happens a lot with location pages. Like when you create shitty location pages, and like you go and look in your like a URL inspector tool and see Google canonicalizing them elsewhere, it's Google telling you that your location pages suck, and you should probably work on making them better.
Yeah. The boilerplate, service in city, same copy is just, it's not a good solution for ranking well.
Just think about how many pages like that for each big brand location that are out there on the web, not including their own domain, every IYP and everything, right? Like, what kind of, Google sees all those pages that are virtually identical. What kind of experience is that in terms of them wanting to surface it? Which is why brands, again, don't need to do very much other than just like put some meaningful copy on your pages and like do the work, right? It's just a big process for them to do it.
Sorry, Dan, you mentioned where do you find, or where do you see that canonicalization being reported by Google?
Yeah, so like one thing that we see often in this is multi-location brands, internet Yellow pages, marketplaces, right? Like food delivery marketplaces, etc., is seeing Google in the URL inspector in Search Console. When you look at one like location, seeing Google selecting the canonical of another location, and seeing that happen for multiple types of pages in the same template. So you see multiple location pages canonicling elsewhere, multiple city pages canonicling elsewhere. That's because Google doesn't understand the value of those pages and how they, like, why they're relevant for those queries, right? Like they're trying to sort out all your terrible stuff.
Here's my favorite trick to help kind of sleuth this stuff. So there's such a thing called a Google custom search engine. If you go to cse.google.com, you can make your own custom search engine, which is essentially a way for Google to search only your site and show results from your site. And a lot of SEOs try to like look at high level Google problems by doing what's called a site colon query. So site colon domain, site colon localseoguide.com, because they think that shows how Google prioritizes stuff for localseoguide.com or your domain. But who knows how the order is determined for that. But a custom search engine presumably will always show you what Google thinks is the most relevant page on your site for any query. So if you create a custom search engine and it's a public URL, you can now search that domain for Denver or South Denver and see what comes up first. And if you search South Denver and the Denver page comes up first, that's a clue that your Denver page is screwing your South Denver location. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a great tip, actually. Maybe we can give a link out to kind of Google kind of custom search page. So I know there's got a product page.
I'll get you one for our site.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, great answer, guys. And there's loads of good stuff in there around, kind of content duplication, site structure, which I'm pretty sure we've got a bunch of questions about. So I'm going to dip back into the question section. Thanks for Gavin. I hope that was a good answer for you. Next question comes from Alyssa. And actually asked her to add a bit more kind of detail to this, so we can give an answer. So thanks, Alyssa, for doing that. So it says, her question is it a bad idea to create location-based service pages? We have locations in 4 different states. She says, we're a managed service provider. We do pretty much everything IT related, structured cabling, IT, telecom, cybersecurity. So essentially, I guess, not sure whether it's kind of commercial or residential, but they're an IT sort of services business. 4 locations, different states. So to better help align our services to each location, we've created pages for many. I've tried to do this right.
No, I want this one.
Duplicate content. Okay.
No, it's mine.
This one is mine, Andrew. This is
okay,
mine.
so the question is
fight you
around structure, duplicate content, and making sure that you're just doing that in the most optimal way.
This is our number one money-making strategy right now for local businesses. I don't want to get too deep into it, but a lot of what we're doing on the data side is surfacing how Google is showing a lot of location plus service, location plus product queries. So we're doing a lot of sprints creating that content, and it's winning really big right now.
So let me contrarian that, because there's such a thing as overdoing this.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So we have a client right now that was sold by a vendor who builds these kind of pages, 16 service pages per location. If you look at most multi-location businesses that are using this technique, they have maybe 3, maybe 4. Some have a few more. It's really critical that each of these pages you create be a real landing page, not just a spun up business name plus service page, because Google won't rank them unless they're good. And they're and people will bounce off them when they hit them if they're crap. So you need to be judicious with this strategy, but yeah, it can work.
So follow Tyler Reardon on Twitter. Used to be the SEO for Carfax, now is the SEO for Chewy. But a lot of people that do SEO for the marketplaces, right, that target tons of locations, do lots of internal testing, like Andrew is saying, on what is the number of locations and where do you see diminishing returns in terms of gains and losses. And so I've heard a ton from the people that are doing this at places Yelp, DoorDash, CarMax, Carfax, Chewy, all this stuff, on how they're thinking about capping it. So you should be doing it and making sure you're doing a lot of work on figuring out where the money is going to be made with your ability to target the few of those assets that you can create, right? They're very powerful and you should be thinking about it right.
There's, just to make things more confusing, there's an alternate theory or strategy to creating a ton of them. In that they won't rank for much, but they'll show up for brand queries. So if I search local SEO guide Pleasanton, right below, it might show our Pleasanton page. And then right below it, they might show local SEO guide Pleasanton link building, local SEO guide Pleasanton SEO audits. And it could be a way to get someone who's already looking for you funneled through to what they're really looking for faster. And they can show up as site links and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of nuances to it, but in general, don't create 16 per location.
Okay.
You can trick Google into thinking they're branded queries so that you get a branded places sheet for like product category plus location plus brand.
Can I rewind a step? For I think now that people are going out there going like, this sounds fascinating, but if we kind of break it down, Dan, your first comment was we're creating a lot of these service plus location pages, and then obviously Andrew, you went, well, we had a client that did 16 and some are doing 3. What are you seeing as the right way to do it? What's the kind of, the optimal place to start with? We're saying that those pages have definitely got value if done correctly. So can we talk about what, we've talked about what being done correctly means, but in terms of, let's say you've got 100 locations, how do you know, where do you start from to work out what's the right way to do it for this client? What's acceptable per location? How do you figure that out?
Data warehouse their stuff, parse through all the data, and start like seeing where what is ranking for what and for their particular queries. Like when we do these, we do them based on what we're seeing, based on client data, right? And what we see in the meaningful SERPs that those clients are targeting. Not like, hey, in auto we see that this works over here, so we're going to do the same thing over in retail. It's the opposite. We know like, hey, Google likes to show like pages that are targeting product plus location sometimes. So we'll see if like that's true for a business that we're working on, right? Like what do those like location plus product or service queries look like? What kind of businesses are getting surfaced? What is the breakdown of the 10 blue links in the SERPs, right? And what does it look like at scale? And then we'll talk about it and make a decision on where we think an investment should happen. Andrew?
Yeah, I think you want to do some queries and say, is this show local results? Does Google think this is a local query? Because if they don't, then what's the point, right? So as an example, you might sell coffee cups, but coffee cups is probably not a local query. So there's no point in having a local service page. It's as simple as that. And then again, if as Dan says, the data shows we should have a service page, can you create an experience that justifies having it? And that's really where the challenge happens, because most brands are like, oh, we'll just link it from our main location page and we'll put some text in it and that's it. And it really needs to be a landing page experience.
This is where hitting that commercial intent that Andrew was talking about earlier is like really important, right? If it's targeting like a retail page it's like a product subpage, then you better have products on there and like a way for a user to be able to at least move through their purchasing funnel, right? Like, and so I can tell you like some brands do this really well. You can check Home Depot stuff out where they like have 3 or 4 per location and it's bucketed by business unit line, right? So like their home services like subpage is like all commercialized for doing home services and getting you in touch with somebody to redo your floors or all of that stuff, right? Like it matches the intent for the SERP. So users do the query, Google ranks it, they click through there, and then they can transact business, right? Like if you can't transact business, it's not going to mean anything for you, and you're not going to be there very long.
Another good rule of thumb is if you can justify getting a Google My Business department page for that service or that product, then it probably deserves its own page. Mm-hmm. That's a kind of a quick way to think about it.
Andy, just want to quickly elaborate on what a department page is?
So it's typically it kind of feels like a individual business unit inside a store, inside a location. I forget what all the different rules are around it, but it needs to have its own phone number. They'd like it to have its own, it can't have the same name as the business. So it has to be like Joe Blow's, fuel center or something.
They want you to have separate categories, and you specifically should have separate categories because you should be trying to target different things with them.
Yeah. And the more locations you have and the bigger the brand, Google may actually create these for you. A couple of years ago, they started automating creating departments for GMB pages for a lot of multi-location businesses.
Okay. So essentially it's a if you will, a kind of child page that relates to a specific department within the organization, but that department has to be distinct in its own right. So let's say it's a kind of a car showroom. You've got repairs, and then you've got sales, or you've got, I don't know, some sort of thing where there's a different phone number, maybe even a different entrance, different sort of signage, but it kind of, people might be specifically looking for that function within a bigger business. You can have these department pages, and you're kind of saying that if Google sees it that way, then you should be having separate sort of functional pages on your website that mirror that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to the point of kind of content creation, because let's say you're working with a 500 location business, and you want to kind of build out these kind of landing pages for each location. Are you typically looking to build out like one sort of hub page for the location and then sub pages relating to the services of that? Is that typically the structure that you would create around a location page?
Yeah, but I think you also want to make sure the national version of that service page links to that local service page.
But how does that work? How does that work when you got a national service page and you've got 500 locations? You can't presumably link to all of them.
Well, it depends how crapped up you want to make your website. You probably prioritize what are your priority locations, or you just create you could create an HTML sitemap that's linked off of that national page. Some way you need
national service pages not very relevant for search or user experience results in 2020.
Okay, so it's all about localization then. Those local product, local service pages is the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that the key? Do those rank much better then? And do you find that users convert much better on those pages if they come into the site at that level?
I mean, they're tertiary business units of billion-dollar companies. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, they're spending tons of money on them because the return on them is fantastic. Some of our biggest wins in local search for some of our clients are specifically on their secondary business units, right? Because they're long kind of neglected, not really dealt with a ton, and have a ton of market opportunity to just take by just kind of getting things in line.
Okay.
Yeah, but it also applies to smaller businesses too, right?
Oh yeah.
It's because it just makes sense. The search for this thing is much more qualified than and so if you land on that page, you're probably more in the mindset of buying whatever you were searching for, thinking about it.
Let's go to the next question, guys. Brilliant. We're going to overrun, I'm afraid. Is that going to be all right with you two? Can you hang on a little bit? Because we're covering off ground at such a rapid pace, but it's excellent. Could you hang on like 15 minutes more?
Yeah. I'll tell Greg Sterling to hold on.
No one tells Greg to hold on. Okay. Next question. This comes from Amir. Is it better to add location pages to a business, or is there an opportunity, to get a whole new GMB in the other location? Do that instead. Is it better to add location pages to a business? Amir, could you maybe just qualify what you specifically mean by that question? And I'll kind of loop back to it. I'm going to go to Doug's question, which comes next. Doug says, I have two websites for my business, which puts me as a different specialist in each. Both operate from the same NAP. Is it worth creating a separate GMB account for each? And is it worth getting a separate phone number for each as well? You know, what penalties might I run into?
Ben, you want to take that? I'm sending Greg sorry, I'm late. Email.
Oh yeah, of course. Do it. 100% do it. If they're different business categories, like if it's a different specialization, like you want to be, like I was saying before, right? Like the different GMB pages let you set different categories that let you target different search queries. So having different domains, different GMB profiles with different categories will let you perform better for each of those kind of separate specialties.
When does it Google get suspicious about that? And essentially, if it's the same guy doing basically what sounds like two different jobs, hasn't specified what those are, how closely related they are, because at some point Google's going to if they got exactly the same NAP, they would need to have the different phone numbers at the very least. But if they have the same NAP and it's is there any chance of kind of Google thinking that this is a spammy tactic?
I mean, people do way worse stuff than that all the time, and Google doesn't see it. You know what I mean? So, having things like having two businesses at the same physical address is not nearly a problem anymore, particularly when they're very disparate, right? Mm-hmm. So, like if one was like a podiatrist and the other one was like a retail store, right? Like those two businesses at the same location, like the NAP is not going to be a problem. They're totally different categories. Right. Okay. And so, and I mean, I would say you would probably want to think about kind of combining all of these into a single domain if you're going to like start expanding. But again, we have a client with 330 locations. Google doesn't think it's a link farm when they all link to each other either, right? Like they could, but they don't.
Okay, interesting. So essentially the distinguishing features need to be category, operating in a different category. Probably phone number is an important thing to kind of separate out as well. But also those two things are distinct. You've got different domains. Then having a separate GMB would allow you to compete for those two different categories and relevant searches in those more effectively than having one combined GMB with only one sort of single category.
Yeah, I would say that always separate. Like that's one of the things that we look at when we're talking about like strategically when you might want to separate out a GMB profile into like two different departments is like, can you get another department and are you targeting tons of disparate things, right? Like, because if you are, then it likely just makes sense to have two different GMB profiles to have stronger individual category targeting.
Yeah. In the chat, Efrat's got an interesting question kind of related to phone number. In terms of phone numbers for multi-location businesses, sometimes multi-location businesses will have like a centralized call center number that will then route down to a kind of local level based on some sort of automation. Have you ever come across that, and how do you kind of handle that with multi-location clients to, I guess, provide that localization and to avoid any kind of running into kind of any kind of penalty issues with Google?
I mean, GMB has the ability to like set multiple phone numbers now in the profile, and Schema has the ability to take multiple phone numbers in location page markup, right? So like we have clients that use centralized call centers and have both singular numbers and localized numbers, and like both are winning, right? So I'd be hard pressed to say like having the centralized phone number is going to like make you perform like worse, right? If you generate more leads by having a centralized call center, do it.
I think phone numbers has kind of over time become less and less of a key screw up in local SEO. It used to be a critical thing that everything had a uniform number, but Google kind of figured out that the number thing is like a mess. And so I don't think they care as much.
Okay, great. We'll go on to the next question. This comes from Philippe. It's not really multi-location, but what do you think what do you perceive to be the most important ranking factors for GMB in 2020? Maybe you just rattle them off.
Having a GMB page, number one.
Ranking organically.
Yeah, ranking organically, which is kind of a euphemism for content and links, which is a euphemism for SEO. It's really not more complicated than that. I'll tell you what. It's my favorite story that we've seen lately. We had a window installer guy that we were doing work for. I think it was in Alabama or something. And we did just some basic link acquisition for him from starting November through, I think, February. And then COVID happened and he was like, I can't afford paying for you guys anymore. We just sent that guy a report showing how doing nothing but link building, his rankings are through the roof. He hit the algorithm and it went, boom. So I think basic SEO is the number one Google My Business ranking factor.
I just dropped a post from our site in the chat of sprints that we did that were totally around organic search for a brand, and the report is showing you increase in GMB pack traffic. So traffic in the analytics package that reports is coming in from the pack. Did nothing, only organic search, GMB traffic went up and to the right. Mm-hmm.
Great. Excellent answer. Thank you, guys. Next question comes from Derek. This is in regards to, again, this is about multi-location. In regards to additional content beyond the sort of service type content, kind of blogs and more kind of creative content. Is that something you ever get into creating for customers? And if you, is the reason, if you don't, is there a reason why you don't? And if you do, how do you kind of go about it? What's the most efficient and effective way of structuring that content and then actually kind of producing it and creating it?
Sure. It's actually become probably I don't know if it's the biggest part of our business, but it's definitely the one that's most kind of interesting to us in some ways. So first, actually, back to the other thing. It just occurred to me, keyword and business name of your Google My Business page is probably the number one ranking factor. So try to experiment with that. As far as content goes, so I think the process, right, is can you be pretty data driven about the kind of content you're going to create. Meaning, does it line up with the research you've done on what people are searching for and what Google is displaying in the top results for queries you're trying to target? So as an example, if Google is showing videos, your content must be a video, right? If Google is showing top 10 reviews of products, you need to do a top 10 reviews of products, that kind of thing. And then can you scale content in a way with a process that allows you to kind of SEO it while also having usable, like user-friendly content? And that, I think, is kind of a trick to, one, create something that's not just SEO driven, but actually is like something someone would read. And then can you scale that? And I think actually Dan actually turned my head on this a bit. In the early days when we started focusing on content, I was kind of obsessed with what Dan would probably call home runs. Like, hey, everyone's talking about they did some crazy thing and they got 1 million links. And I was like, we need to do that. And he goes, no, we need to do like hit singles, consistently hit singles. And of course he was right. And that's kind of what a good content program should do, is just hit singles all day long.
I'll just to add to that, like the person that is like our director on the content side doesn't have an SEO background. They have a journalism and product management background and an understanding of SEO, but or like their ownership in our organization is to create good content. They're responsible for the quality, not the SEO of it. They don't own the SEO of it at all. They own, is this good, and being taught how to bring SEO to it, right? And so this is like the important thing to think about when you're talking about kind of editorial content is, can you offer a unique perspective on it? Can you create that perspective in a way, like Andrew is saying, that dovetails with like your keyword research? And then like, can you launch a few pieces to see if you can get some traction and see what the impact of that is on the business? Because, you know, creating content flywheels is honestly one of the probably easier things to do in SEO if you can do content and link building yourself, because you're now always fueling something that is going to continually drive their marketing for their domain as a whole, right? Like making it more evergreen, but also in like you're working on now particular marketing campaigns, right? Like, oh, you have a B2B client that is launching a thing about this topic area. You can now kind of create a push of content around that topic and not just help their domain as a whole rank, but you can help their kind of campaigns, right? And I think that that's like a big gap that like content marketers have understood for a while, but maybe SEOs haven't.
Okay.
I just dropped a link in the chat that's kind of a real case study we had a few months ago, where a direct-to-consumer brand hired us to do content SEO for them, and they thought they were hiring us to do what I'll call sexy content, because they were doing a lot of sexy content that wasn't ranking for anything. And we were like, you guys make it sexy if you want. We just want to rank for stuff. And we had a very, it actually wasn't a good engagement, because we were totally not talking to each other. We were trying to talk to them, but they were not. They were obsessed with it has to be this sexy Kim Kardashian thing. And we're like, no, it has to be
stuff, like the promotable, paid social, viral kind of stuff.
Right. And we're like, no, it needs to be hit on all these things that people want to know. And sure, it can be promotable, but the real job is, what are the things that people are searching for that they want questions answered? And here are how to answer it. And so I think whenever you're doing a content programming, you better have expectations set up front. If you're doing it for SEO, it can be sexy, but sexy is not the priority. The priority is answer the questions that people are searching for better than someone else's.
And crush your KPIs, right? Like we think that there's like X amount of like white space or search volume around a topic. We think we can get 15 to 20% of it if we kind of start these few things. We think that these customers are better converting or more valuable to the business, right? So that we want to get them. And then now you have a bunch of hypotheses that, like, if you're taking a small engagement, kind of like Andrew was talking about, and proving out an individual case study on the value of it, you can say, hey, we did this thing, we tried to hit this stuff, we either did it or not. Go from there.
That's why we really like B2B clients, because the content around them it's all conversion oriented, right? There's no like sexy fluff around some SaaS local rank tracking product, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Also his sexy, practical, and answers your question.
You actually totally get it, and I think that this is a good way to bring Miles into this. Is that people think that like SEO, like doing SEO for normal organizations, is like doing SEO for SEO organization, like doing content for SEO organizations, right? But like y'all create a ton of content around your B2B product, which is what your business is. Versus like doing that for a client, it's not the same types of content, right? They may not be a SaaS product, although if they are, things like comparison pages, right? Like feature comparisons, integrations, all the stuff that y'all are doing are huge across all of the SaaS verticals because it's how people are searching for solutions rather to problems, right?
Yeah, we're building content to answer the questions that our customers have, and every different business has got different customers with different questions around what they're looking for. So exactly. It's very simple if you think about it in that way. Right, next question. This one comes from Anthony. It's about GMB Q&As, and I'm going to basically splice his question a bit. It says, so do you guys bother with Q&A for when you're dealing with a multi-location sort of business? And if you are answering questions or encouraging people to answer questions, do you try and get like the business owner or the manager to kind of do it, or what's your sort of strategy for getting the right person to engage in the Q&A?
It's sort of client dependent. Most clients, in our experience, won't do it. So you have to do it for them, which means research. You can set up a meeting and ask them. You can send them a questionnaire. They'll fill out like 10% of it and then get distracted. So you kind of have to do it and then say, can you look at this? Do you approve? And let them kind of edit it. Some have pretty robust content groups that will do it for you. And then in that case, you're just giving them the SEO guidance.
Okay. Do you ever do Q&A at scale for like across lots of locations in terms of kind of going in and putting in seeding the same questions and the same answers?
It's too difficult to do it I mean, you probably actually know this better than we do in terms of like both the tools plus like the staffing to be able to do it. You're talking about 2,000 locations. It's like first, what is the question that you're trying to seed to get ahead of something? And then like, what's the way that you hit it with all of like the thumbs up? And then how do you get other people to respond to it, right? Just the tools and like human resources to be able to manage that is very difficult. We want to try to get people to just respond to them. And that is already like a giant challenge.
Okay. How about posts then? Is that in a similar vein in terms of, you struggle to get the kind of business to engage? Is that something you find it much easier?
Yeah, okay. Posts are easy for us.
Okay. So, and are you utilizing it as a general part of your playbook?
100%. We have systems. So we have a headless browsing auto poster that we built pre the API allowing chain posts. So we can do posts at scale, no problem. Have been able to for a few months, but also we build systems that integrate with like our clients' ERP solutions. Right. So that we take like discounts and stuff like that or content that they're surfacing to like Facebook or their websites or whatever and get those dumped into a spreadsheet and then get a bot to take those and like put them into a schedule and then auto post them. So like doing posting at scale, if you can build a system around it, is so easy. Right. And the value is like, I mean, you're talking about like 100x ROI, right? Because it's like a small project that is basically like infinitely revenue driving. I don't know, Andrew, you have any thoughts?
Well, I guess so. So Dan's talking about the Ferrari of GMB auto posters, which we're psyched we have a Ferrari. So big credit to Dan and his team for building this thing that no one else has. So we can post to like thousands of locations at a time. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. As an example, we have a big client, several hundred locations who they don't care. I guess they don't care. They don't know. We're like, hey, let's do GMB posts. They're like, sure, just go do it. And what we did was I just screenshotted an offer on their site, put it into our little GMB post form, and we used Dan's machine to post it. And so you don't need access to an ERP system. You just need to take 5 minutes out of your day and make a post.
Well, you can also just like go to their Facebook account and steal stuff, right? Like if you have their buy-in to do it, you can go get like the content to be able to syndicate
so
like that.
So for our system, and it took me 5 minutes to make the post, and we posted that to 5,500 different locations. They have a lot of department pages, and so those things, yeah, what's great about them is they harvest brand traffic, which is the most qualified traffic. So you can kind of lure a customer in who's already looking for you with an offer, and so that's why we like them.
And are you saying, yes, I get what you mean in terms of they don't necessarily increase visibility that much, but they might increase conversion from the SERP or get someone into a targeted page. Are you, because someone's already looking for you in that capacity, are you seeing like a kind of net gain in terms of the traffic you get when you do that? Or are you just seeing that the traffic is similar because they might have clicked anyway, but you're finding them to the right point?
It's not big traffic.
14% for some of our clients.
So again, 14% uplift.
Conversion, not a conversion rate from the traffic from posts. So like meaning like orders of magnitude higher than normal conversion rates.
Right. Okay.
It's not gonna double your traffic. It's gonna maybe 1% increase your traffic, but that 1% is really qualified.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're just reporting on traffic, it'll be a loser every time. If you're reporting on conversion, it'll probably be a winner.
And if you're trying to like get, like, say you have a content program over here in your brand or whatever, and you want to repurpose that, and so you're trying to like get your teams together, and now you have like integration wins like for the organization, right? There's like a lot of big wins for on posts, being able to just like bring parts of a business together and start syndicating content, right? Like it's just a really clean and easy content syndication channel.
And it sounds therefore like the landing page needs real consideration that you're directing it to. Like you said, you're going to get, there's potential to get 14% conversion, which I don't know what the base conversion is like, but I'd love 40% conversion on most of my pages. So are you putting as much or more consideration into the landing page experience you're driving people to from those posts as you are the posts themselves?
So we create like offers pages specifically, right? So like any page with a post that takes you to like an offer or a deal or whatever, takes you exactly to the thing that it's telling you it gives you, right? And that's like the kind of core part for us is if you're gonna, it's just like kind of basic marketing stuff, right? But if you're gonna hit somebody with an advertising message that they're gonna be getting this thing, then like you send them directly to it because you want them to get it right away. And the easier it makes you make it for them, the better it is for you.
Hey, Miles, I apologize. I've actually got to jump, but Dan, if you have time, you stay on.
That's and, right. I think we'll wrap this up. We've kind of covered a sort of huge amount of ground. It's been amazing, guys. Thank you so much. I know we didn't ask every kind of question, but we covered a huge breadth in lots of the stuff that we kind of did cover. You guys are fantastic. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in your office on a sort of maybe on a Thursday afternoon just to kind of see the stuff that you kind of discuss and kind of get up to. I will certainly be listening in to your kind of clinic series. When is it kicking off?
We're not that put together. Soon. Go on the site and
tomorrow. I guess tomorrow, everyone.
We have to figure out a date in the next couple of weeks. So go on the site.
You had one job, Andrew.
Yeah, that's what you do. It's like this. So yeah, we'll be announcing the launch date probably in a week or so. And there's an email thing you can sign up, and we'll send you an email. Say, here's when it's going. We won't spam you. And the idea is to do it weekly. Just have a super casual, kind of just like this, Miles. I mean, you guys have been so great in doing this for the community. So we want to kind of put our own little spin on it. And as you can see, there's an endless amount of questions, and we're happy to spend time talking about it because we're idiots who are interested in this kind of stuff. So thanks, everyone.
You're not idiots. You're geniuses, and you've been able to distill lots of that kind of genius down to kind of digestible kind of tactics and strategies. And I picked up a vast amount of insight from this guy. So thanks for your time. Sorry that we ran over. Say hi to Greg. Have a wonderful